Recently, I made a momentous decision. I have actually made the decision to retire. Oh, thank you. Well, maybe I don't need to say anything else. That's okay. I've lost track of how many times over the last few months I've been asked, so, Dan, what's next for you? And I usually hum and I haw a little bit, and I say things like, well, maybe I'll do another interim ministry, or maybe a short-term appointment, do some pulpit supply, and so on. Or maybe think about retirement. Now, we have a little phrase in our family. Whenever we want to avoid a subject, we say, oh, now there's an idea, and that just immediately shelves it for some time. So when this started coming around, I was going and saying, there's an idea. So it was about a week or two ago that I finally made the decision and can firmly say, I'm retiring. I submitted the various forms and applications, and the wheels have begun to turn. It's exciting and it's frightening. Those of you who have retired know the feeling. It's a new stage of life, leaving behind familiar things, starting something new, a new role, a different purpose, perhaps a different change of pace and place. It is scary. Now, the most common question is, so, what are you going to do in your retirement? Well, I'm going to take some downtime over the summer and maybe later in August do some stuff around the house. A few things have been neglected over this last 2 years and want attention. And the biggest one, I suppose, is remodeling our bathroom. Ooh. Now, this seems a bit of a déjà vu all over again. This will be the third, or maybe it's the fourth time that I've done some sort of renovations, decorations to the smallest room in the house. Now, I used to have this attitude that when you did things like this, they were once done and done. You built something and it was finished. Sort of like the Roman Colosseum. You don't see the Romans going in every 200 years and saying, I think we need a new paint job here. Or you put new shingles on the roof and they come with this amazing 25-year guarantee, and then all of a sudden it's 26 years later and you need a new roof. How did that happen? Well, time and tide are what happened. Time takes its toll, and the tide changes the context, the place. Different needs, options, opportunities, and challenges arise that make the renovation not only necessary, but interesting and maybe even exciting, but also frightening. Go into any showroom and see the mind-boggling assortment of sinks and soaker tubs and heated floors and towel racks and shower heads. Does anyone here really have a shower head that plays music and a light show while you're taking care of business in the morning? Maybe that's TMI. Things that were undreamed of 30 or 40 years ago, when the fanciest thing in the most modern bathroom was a knitted cozy that went around the spare roll of toilet paper. Some of you know this. Now, the choices are positively overwhelming. Now, isn't this a little bit like what we've been doing here at East End? It's overwhelming and continuous, almost never-ending renovations. Now, I don't mean the new stage or the sound equipment at Eastminster, nor the narthex counter and the new washrooms downstairs here at Glen Rhodes, fixing leaky roofs and sputtering boilers or creaky elevators, or all the other parts of a church building, the bricks that we've been working on, but the church itself, the community, the fellowship, the embodiment of God's presence in our neighborhoods. In other words, us. These are the things that we really have been working on renovating. Over the last 2 years, and even before that, we've been shaping and reshaping what it means to be East End United. We've reflected on our calling and mission. Where is God calling us and leading us? And how do we see the face of Jesus in a diverse and multi-faith setting? We've embraced a deepened sense of our identity, deeply rooted in a radical hospitality. And at the same time, we're discovering that it's way more complicated than simply embroidering this on a banner and hanging it on the wall. We've toiled away at what it means to have numerous, demanding, life-giving, and essential community ministries that serve hundreds of individuals and families with food, with clothing, with warmth, with dignity, and with grace. And all that is now shaping how we understand ourselves and the breadth and depth of our congregation and the community. We're welcoming refugees not with financial support and practical things like beds and baby buggies and things like this, but by embracing them into the family and helping them nurture new roots in a strange land. We've done things like gone out to other congregations and connected them with them, some of them not exactly like us. But one of the fruits of that work is that we have almost doubled our farm in Stouffville, with now 18 acres instead of 10 acres that will be providing food around the world. And we're still wrestling with what it means for us to come together as 3 congregations, as one, and to keep a faithful presence in those 3 neighborhoods and sustain 2 active community hubs. Wow. It's no wonder it feels like we're living in the middle of a never-ending renovation. It's as if you looked around and there were ladders and tools on the floor and sheets of drywall here and there and wires hanging from the ceiling and exposed plumbing pipes and dust. Lots and lots of dust. If God's house has so many rooms, couldn't we just move to another one that didn't need so much work? Or like my little renovation project, just look at it all and say, you know what? It's fine. It'll do. That has certainly crossed my mind regarding my bathroom renovation. I look at it and think, you know what? It's okay. I don't need to do all this work. But I don't think that's what God wants. And I don't think that's what Jesus is thinking about when he talks about God's house and its many rooms. Now, this passage gets translated in a variety of ways depending on which version of the Bible you're reading. God's house has many mansions, many rooms, many dwelling places. There's even a more generic, simple reference. There's just a lot of room in God's house. And I was pondering this, and I thought, well, mansions, that just sounds a little snobby. Lots of room is good, but it suggests to me sort of one great big space. Something like a whole bunch of football fields all joined together. No, I like the idea of many rooms or many dwelling places. In my mind, that suggests that the rooms are different, distinctive, maybe even unique, perhaps even customized to a purpose, to a certain goal, to a certain end. But even when a room is that highly customized and well finished, you have to decide whether you're going to love it or leave it. Like the TV show, love it or leave it, renovate or relocate. And we here at East End, we have decided to love it and renovate it. And that's not all easy. The continuous renovations. There are indeed many rooms, many dwelling places, and it's an obvious fact that ours is still under construction. And that's tough. That's tough because living amid the clutter and debris of renovation and the uncertainty and the changing plans, sometimes the changing directions, supply chain problems, metaphorically speaking, the trials and errors. We try things that don't work. We try something else. Maybe it works. The successes, the duds, and the growing feeling, oh my God, will this renovation never end? Well, friends, here's the bad news. It won't end. But here also is the good news. It won't end. It's bad news in a way because we usually want to see things come to a natural, inevitable conclusion. We want the reno to be finished. as it were, the room to be complete, to be able to step back and admire our handiwork, to go to that to-do list and check it all off, tie it up with a nice bright ribbon, and say, great, done and dusted. And this is bad news because that is not how it works. But the good news is that's not how it works. Being church, defining ourselves as church, is an ongoing, evolving, growing, shifting process. Because the world in which we and God move, the rooms in God's house, are evolving and growing and shifting. If it weren't so, we'd be doing church exactly the way it was done back in the 50s. I'd be up here in a big black preaching gown, and all of you would be here in your best suits, your dresses, your gloves, and your hats, and Pat would be in the back with about 120 kids. We sometimes think of that as the glory days, but it's not. That's the past. That's not the world we're renovating for. That's not the church Jesus is calling us to be. And those are not the rooms in God's house, not in God's house today and tomorrow. But here's where the good news does come in. The renovations, as I say, won't end. And yes, I know that sounds counterintuitive, because it is counterintuitive. But it's also faithful. It's deeply faithful. In God's house, there are many rooms, and this is the room we've been given freely and generously with the tools. Not just the buckets of paint and the sheets of drywall, but the talent, the resources, the wisdom, the faithfulness, the fellowship. You here at East End, to be this thing called church. Sometimes that looks like right what we're doing today, Sunday worship. Other times it looks like refugee sponsorship or community meals, the food bank or the out of the cold, a workshop on arts, a picnic in the park. Occasionally it looks like difficult conversations about faith and what it means to be inclusive. Other times it's joining with others to advocate for a living wage, sustainable communities, environmental preservation, taking a stand on political issues. Sometimes it's basketball in the basement and DJC kids running all through the church on a Thursday afternoon. Unitarians in the North Wing carrying the cross to Withrow Park with our neighbors. But often we won't know what it looks like because the context and the needs and God's Spirit are changing in front of us so quickly. And that confusion, that uncertainty is deeply faithful because that is a sign that the Spirit is alive in us and through us. God's Spirit is always on the move, always changing, always ready to do a new thing. And so can such a restless spirit be content with a so-called finished room? Can such an ambitious spirit be satisfied with something we might consider done and dusted and us ready to move on? Part of me sincerely wishes that at the end of our 2 years together, we could have checked everything off our to-do list and wrapped it all up with that bow. And that might have been nice. But I don't think it would have been very honest. I don't think it would have been very realistic, questionably faithful, and I don't think very true. In hindsight, I think a lot of the things that were on that to-do list were more like direction arrows than actual destination signs. And that's okay. That's okay because at the end of the day, this is all about the journey we are on together and not so much about a final destination. Building a church, renovating the fabric of our beautiful, historic, meaningful buildings is relatively easy. It's like renovating my bathroom. You can work it out in tasks, you can put together a budget, you hire contractors, and eventually it more or less gets done. Renovating church, the community of faith of us that lives and exercises ministry through these buildings on the other hand, is an ongoing, continuous, dynamic, creative, sometimes exhausting, frequently frustrating process. Ultimately, it is a Spirit-led experience that dwells in our hearts, not in rooms of bricks and mortar. These heart-shaped rooms, if you will, are constantly being developed and redeveloped as God leads us forward into a new thing. They're like blank canvases, a starting place where design, form, and function come together to meet God's people where we are, in our needs, in the midst of our faith, in the midst of our love for the world. And since that is constantly changing, all that context is constantly changing, we, God's rooms, are constantly changing. I'm really not so sure what my life will look like after my time here at East End is finished. Retirement is truly daunting, and it's a big adaptation. But similarly, I don't see it as a destination or some sort of final stop or a prize on the journey. It's just further steps on an existing path. Different, but a similar path. The bathroom reno will likely get done along with a bunch of other things. But it's useful for me to keep reminding myself that these are tasks and to not confuse them with a sense of purpose. Similarly, renovating church, not the church building, but church, the continuous discernment of who we are as East End United, exploring our calling, expanding our faithfulness to God's love in the world, these are not the end goals or the final objectives, but are truly, truly the purpose of being church. That is the good news. And the real good news is that there is no bad news. Amen. We are going to sing, and we're going to sing, as you will see from the musical selection, a lot